wanted to give you an embarrassing anecdote from my repertoire that I think really captures things that using REDCap intentionally can help to mitigate. To set the scene, it is 2009. I'm a brand new, just starting my very first research assistant job. And the hospital that I'm working with has been collecting and testing samples from all these kids that are being seen in a particular clinic. The research team that I'm working with wants to conduct a retrospective cohort study and identify factors that are associated with positive chlamydia or gonorrhea in these kids in this clinic. So this was essentially a medical record review. And since it was my first, it was a total train wreck, to say the least. So at the start, our team did have, some questions of interest and some variables that we knew at the outset would be important to capture, but it was not a fully, comprehensive list. And we also hadn't specified at the outset, how those data would be collected. So it was a very crude data abstraction plan, which resulted in some pretty crude data abstraction. So the very first iterations of my data were what one of my colleagues, Dr. Grayson Baird, would call free range data. And that's why we've got this picture with the chickens here. So this is just an example of the kinds of data that would be collected. This is not the actual data, but the format that it's in is very true to the garbage that I had in my first iterations of this data set. I'm going to walk you through some of this stuff because it's one of those things where it's a headache not only for analysis, because now you have a ton of data cleaning to do before you can even get to analysis, but it also creates issues where you have incorrect information in here and you have to go back into the record if you're lucky enough to be able to go back to the record and track down what the truth is. So the first one I want to point out here is the column for medical record number. This is something that in most, I think, hospital systems and whatnot, it's usually the same number. Like in Lifespan, our medical record numbers are 10 digits. You might note looking through this column that those numbers, like from row to row, have a different number of digits, which means that there are some typos happening in here. Now, no, I did this data collection in Excel, which if you learn one thing today, if I can encourage you to do one thing today, it's please don't abstract your data in Excel, because Excel makes so many assumptions about the kind of data that you're collecting and what format it's in, whether or not you specify a format for it. So here it's possible that these numbers actually began with a 0 and then Excel just kind of dropped that 0 off as an example. Whoever just came on, would you mind just muting your microphone, please? Thank you. And then another example of where this creeps in is with dates. So again, Excel does really wonky things with dates. If you only have part of your date, whether it be the month and the day or the month and the year, it's going to make assumptions about what information you're giving it. This causes a lot of issues. If you want to have any sort of calculation fields where you're calculating, age afterward from your date of birth and your time of visit or what have you, where you're going to have incorrect information in here. So another example of some sad data collection here. I didn't specify at the outset how I'd be capturing, positive and negative results versus missing results and whatnot. So here we've got no, neg, a minus sign, the letter N. And for some of these, the letter N, that could mean it was a negative result. It could also mean there was no result. It could also mean, the data just were missing. So I have no idea if it was done or not. This is something that causes issues where, we aren't able to actually calculate, what proportion were negative or what have you, because this is all kind of muddy. Of a similar token is the physical exam findings. Here I have none, and none could mean exam was done. It could mean there was a physical exam done, but they were normal findings. It could mean that I don't know if the physical exam was done. So these are all little caveats. I mean, another element to the physical exam piece is here abnormal. We weren't really clear about, at the outset, what characteristics do we want to use to define what an abnormal physical exam is. So it's all mucky. And then there were also variables that we found out later that we really wanted to collect. This resulted in me going back through hundreds of records to pull these variables out. And then because I had all these sort of data quality issues before where we weren't really sure if this was a negative or a missing value, that was me going back through the records again to figure out, all right, this is a negative versus this is missing. Having REDCap would have really helped me streamline my process here. Not that, you know, REDCap's a tool that, of course, you know, we can do things, we could use it dangerously if we want to, but if you use it in a really intentional way, it has the potential to help reduce the chance that you'll do something like this in your research. So let me get into it with you about REDCap. So REDCap stands for Research Electronic Data Capture, and it's an electronic data capture tool. So this is something that it's used by study staff. You can use it to input a variety of data, whether it be from medical records, paper forms, literature reviews, what have you. You can collect it yourself. You know, you could be a data abstractor entering data in REDCap, or you could also set it up so that it, you know, will be a survey that participants complete and input their own data. This is a system that was created by and is actively maintained by Vanderbilt University for use by universities and nonprofits. So in using REDCap, we are part of this global community. The REDCap Consortium currently has nearly 5,000 active partners in countries all over the world. And being in this community really enables us to troubleshoot and share ideas. As a result of this platform is constantly being updated and improved. And actually, in that regard, we've got an update coming down the line next week. It's the 19th. So you might see that on the screen if you're trying to hang out in REDCap right now. And there's instructions on our website about what to do with that update, but I'll orient you to at the end of this lecture. So REDCap can be used for research and non-research activities, be it surveys, cross-sectional or longitudinal projects, bench science, clinical research, quality assurance, literature review, database management, and more. So REDCap can help you increase the quality of data entry, increase research productivity, promote future research, increase security, and these are things that are not mutually exclusive. So at the start of this talk, I gave you several examples of common errors in data entry. The big one that we see a lot of here is the free range data entry of this unstandardized data. And as I mentioned in my personal example, you know, using Excel, for instance, can add additional headaches to this. You know, poor formatting of this data in Excel is going to make Excel guess what kind of data you're giving it. God forbid you also have Excel making calculations where you have the opportunity for the wrong reference cell to be used. And just like the experience I shared with you, you know, this could cause hours, if not days, if not weeks and months of extra work having to do this cleanup in the best case. And in the worst case, you end up with the wrong data. I was lucky that I was doing chart review, so I could go back to those records. And even though it was painstaking to go back through those records, I was able to correct errors that were in my data capture form. This would not be quite the case if you were conducting interviews and that's how you're getting your information. You can't exactly go back to that unless you've got them recorded and saved. So REDCap can help us to reduce these errors in data entry because it has great functionality in helping us in advance of doing our project to standardize our responses using categories. You can include automated validation fields for any of those free text items that you have on there, which is really going to help you to minimize variation between data collectors and also between yourself too. Because trust me, you start a project, you know, right now that you're still working on in a few years, and you might find yourself answering some questions a little differently. So anything you can do in advance to standardize data collection, the better. They even have this calculated fields option, so you can be able to do things like calculate age from their date of birth and their date of visit and all that stuff. So this is your first screenshot of what it looks like in the lifespan instance of REDCap to give you a little view of the current field types that we have access to. So we've got text box, notes box, calculated fields. You've got, for single answer questions, you've got a multiple choice drop down or a multiple choice radio button option. Check boxes, yes, no, true, false. We've got signature, which comes in handy if you're doing, well, electronic informed consent for one. You can actually have their signature right in there. You can upload files, which could include things like a consent form, for instance. We've got slider scale in there that you can have folks rate a certain experience, for instance, on a scale of 0 to 100 or whatever scale you would like to use. And then there's the last two items on here are design features that kind of help change how your data capture form will look. So you've got a way to describe things or add pictures and headings. And as an example of where some of these, where presetting multiple choice variables can be helpful in data collection. So let's talk about abstracting patient gender from a medical record. So here you want to select one of the multiple choice single answer questions. You could do the radio button or the drop down. It doesn't really matter, but here I've got radio button selected. And as you can see, I've got the options for the abstractor to choose from. And in addition to female and male here, I have an option that folks can check if somebody answers something different, like no transgender or gender non-binary, where they'd have the ability to specify. And the person selecting this option would actually prompt a little drop-down box, and I'll show you when we get into the demo how branching logic works to do things like that. And then I also want to point out that whenever you're doing these categories, I strongly recommend including a variable that'll capture like if information was missing, because you want to be able to distinguish, no's and negatives, et cetera, from missing data. So here I have a level for missing data. With free text things like zip codes, phone numbers, dates, all that, you can actually use REDCap to auto-validate a certain data type. So here, for instance, I have birth date, and I'm telling REDCap that I want it to be in the month, day, day, or month, day, year format. And I can even include a little note in here that I want my data abstractors to respond in a certain way. This will give them a little reminder of how to answer that question. Now note, with the beauty of having these auto validation fields is that if someone is taking the survey or filling out the data capture form and you've specified a certain validation field here, if they enter data in a different format than what you've specified, they're going to get a pop-up that says, the data are in the wrong format, and they'll get some more information about how they're supposed to enter that data. And this is just an aside, with dates. If you are in a situation where you don't have the complete date, like for instance, maybe you don't know the day, but you know the month and the year, and you're going to need to still be able to go and calculate age and length of stay or what have you down the line. You can also, create different variables, like a separate variable for month and a separate variable for year that will allow you to if something is missing, you'll still have the information that you need to at least partially calculate these dates. So here I've got a month variable. I'm telling REDCap that I want this to be an integer between 1 and 12 that someone can enter. And for year here, it's also an integer, and I've given some potential realistic data year of birth that folks can enter. So these are the sampling of all the validation types that you can right now with the options of REDCap. So you can choose a variety of date functions. We also have things for email. You've got things for zip codes, phone numbers, social security number, et cetera. And we can have REDCap use the information that we enter to calculate things. So as I mentioned, we can do this with age, BMI, length of stay, whatever you want to do. So here, I am basically having them use the, what this formula is saying. It says, take the rounded difference of whatever they enter for their birthday and today, and report it back in years. And this is just letting it know that I have their birthday entered in month, day, year format. And then this is what you end up getting is an output of the actual age. So you can also use REDCap to perform bulk monitoring for missing values, incorrect data types, values that are out of range, outliers. You can define your own rules. So this is a functionality that we have in there, and I'll show you where that lives when we go into the demonstration. So you have the ability to comment on individual records. which you'll be able to pull up in a log later for review if you want. So, if you're going through and reviewing folks' survey responses and you see something that might be a little wonky, you can make a note of it next to that question in a participant's survey and have a log of all those potential queries. There's also this functionality for double data entry that can be enabled if you're interested. And this is a helpful tool where separate study staff, both abstract the same record, and this allows you to compare how they abstracted that record. Are they concordant in their abstractions? This is something that sometimes is doing like a massive record review. Sometimes what people will do is they'll have like 10% of their those records reviewed by like a second or third party, just to see like how accurate they were in their abstraction. An hour of design really can save a week of analysis, or arguably much more than a week in my opinion. So here we're talking about doing active data management. So by planning things out in advance, we really cut down on design and measurement oversights. We increase our chances of success, and then we can easily export these data into a variety of formats to be used in analysis and beyond. So here you can see what formats are available. Currently we've got Excel, CSV, we've got a format specific to our main statistical software, SPSS, SAS, R, and Stata. We've got the metadata file, and then here you can specify for each item in your data capture form if there's certain things that are identifiable information. So there'll be a little checkbox you can tick, and you can set your data such that you only export the identified data. And it promotes future research. If you develop this awesome instrument and set up your project really well and have another project idea that's very similar in nature, but maybe in just a slightly different population, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've got a couple options here. One option is you can actually download the data dictionary to your current project and upload it into, and you'll have the exact same instrument or instruments that you had in your other project. You can also literally clone your project, including how you set up like if you've got a longitudinal study, for instance, where you set up multiple events and multiple arms, you can literally clone that entire project, bring it into another instance of REDCap, and be able to do the exact same data collection. So REDCap is very handy for repository projects, especially collaborating with folks across institutions, other sites as well. And it allows you for all this work to be done securely. So data are input online with secure web authentication. It uses SSL encryption. You can then assign individual group level rights, individual or group level rights to who can modify things, delete things, all of that. Everything that happens within REDCap is logged, and you'll be able to see those logs, who made what changes when. This really helps us to cut down on data security issues that arise from things like, there's no more need to worry about like if someone's laptop gets stolen or flash drive gets stolen, that there's going to be this private information on there that's now compromised, because this all exists online. It's compliant, in-house, backed up. You can specify individual or group level access rights to who can view data. And as I showed you with that export screen, you can also control, how much identifiable information you want in that exported data set. In defining rights, it can be based on individual specific people in your team. Like someone might say, all right, Andrea is on my team. I want her to have the ability to create questions, download this data set, et cetera, but she can't delete records. But you could also have it be assigned to specific roles. Like for instance, someone who's a data analyst role or a study coordinator role might have the ability to see and do different things in REDCap. Just an example of what it looks like to folks. So this is from my colleague, Dr. Baird's previous presentation here. And you can see these are the different items that you're able to toggle in access rights to. The check marks show you, what they have access to, and the X's are what they don't have access to. And as you can see that there's a lot of things that both of these folks have access to, but only Dr. Baird has access to user rights and data access groups. And you can see that this second person is the only one that can remove records or delete them or rename them. And just for some of the additional features in here, so you can have cross-sectional data, or you can set up longitudinal studies. You can have anonymous surveys or have them tied to specific tracked emails. You can have this built-in validation that I mentioned earlier. You can use branching logic to conditionally show and hide subsequent questions. You can use variable piping to have a participant's response in one question be used in the prompt for a subsequent question. There's a calendar function in here that you can use that's really helpful when you have like a longitudinal study. You can build reports from data collected and look at graphs, lock records so they can't be changed, and implement a change confirmation. You can interface with other data systems. You can upload and securely transfer files, and I'll show you where that lives on the demo as well. Set up a randomization scheme for your randomized control trials. So some happy Pride products here. So folks are getting background and experience using REDCap. This strengthens data management and collection plan, which is really helpful for your IRB submission. And you become part of this growing and international community of researchers, which is pretty cool. So it's all streamlining the process. We are, in creating this database, you've laid out the research design. You now have data collection plan and PDF of questions for IRB. You'll be ready to get going with your data collection after IRB is approved. And because you were really intentional in the design phase, now your data are going to be formatted appropriately for analysis. There's a ton of support for REDCap, both inside and outside of Lifespan and the advanced CTR. So you can email questions directly to our REDCap support at lifespan.org. We've got support in our Lifespan Biostatistics core if you've got questions about data management, planning, and cleaning. We've got Megan Millette. If you're still working through your conceptualization portion of your study design, please feel free to reach out to me. REDCap is hosted, supported, and maintained by our Lifespan information services here. There are many videos online, both with some of our resources, as well as if you just Google REDCap and whatever sort of thing you're trying to figure out how to do, there's a ton of institutions all around the world that are that put together these different resources. So you might, for instance, one place that I see a lot of awesome REDCap videos from is the University of Washington's ITHS. So if you even just Google, ITHS REDCap, you can get some great videos from that as well. And we've got some resources specifically on our advanced CTR website here. So we've got the REDCap Q&A, which answers some questions like how do I designate user rights, use email addresses, etc. There are some reference materials for protecting sensitive participant information. We've got some tutorials that our Dr. Chambers has put together that help you get at understanding randomization and data structure within REDCap. So these all exist for you as well. And now let's go into the demonstration. I'm going to stop sharing this momentarily. All right. Let me share this screen now. Okay, so now we're in, oh, hang on one second, guys. Just give me one moment, just trying to pull up this other piece right here for you. Okay, So this is what REDCap looks like when you pull it up. And you have to log in. And as you can see, I mentioned that there's going to be an upgrade happening on the 19th. Before you log in, so there's this right here shows you some of the features that I already went over a few of them with you on in that little presentation, but there's a few other things mentioned here. This has the updated language for you know, how you would cite REDCap when you do IRB. And we'll just log in. Okay, so across the top here, so you can, you know, go see your projects. So you folks, if you're just starting, you won't have anything in here. As you can see, I've got some projects in here. You know, once you have some, you can create little folders to organize them in, which is helpful. Create a new project. There's the help and fact. This is a great resource if you are doing, trying to work with any of the branching logic, piping, calculated fields. Sometimes this is a massively long file, so I recommend, like, you can even just kind of Control F it and say, you know, for instance, calculation. And this will give you some guidance on some of the most common calculation types. So also in here are some training videos. What's great about these is they're really short little snapshots. Some of them are only, you know, a few minutes long. So if you don't have a ton of time, you can still be able to sit down and learn a little something about it. This is that way to electronically transfer information securely. I think this is a really helpful bonus. This is how I have some of the investigators that I work with send me their data securely. Is they can, as long as the file is 32 megabytes or smaller, you can share data securely this way. What ends up happening is the respondent will get 2 emails, one with a link to go to securely download the materials, and another with a password for them to use. And you can specify how long that they have to be able to use it before it expires. Well, let's go ahead and create a new project. So this is what you'll see if you try to create a new project. We're going to do a fun new project called Pets and Depression as an example. Here you'd select what you're using this project for. So if you are doing a new research project, it's going to have some additional questions for you about you know, what the IRB number is, what the PI is, what the purpose of it is, and more. I'm just going to specify for right now, practice just for fun. And then you've got a few options when it comes to you know, how you want to get started. So if you can either create a brand new instrument on your own, which is what we're going to do, but I also want you to know that you do have access to these existing templates. There might be something in here that will be helpful for you to get started. Like sometimes this basic demography one is helpful to folks because it's some questions about, you know, race, gender, age, and like contact information. If you had done another project that you wanted to clone and do the exact sort of same setup but with a different population, that's where you check this little upload REDCap project XML file. And then this is what we're going to do right now, where we're just going to create a new project. Okay, so we're in here. I'm going to orient you to, so this main screen that you're on right now, this project setup, this is kind of like your task list to go into from what do they call it? It's to go into production. You're currently in development stage, and in order to go into production, you need to think through these steps and triple check that you set it up correctly. So the first kind of questions you get asked are about how your project is set up. Is it something that is it a data capture project that you're going to be where you're going to be entering the data yourself, or are you going to be sending out surveys to participants? And if you're going to do surveys, you would click this button right here, and that would enable a bunch of our survey functionality. You know, next you decide, like, is this going to be a project that it's just a one visit cross-sectional project, or are these participants going to be followed up in a longitudinal setup. So this is where, if it's not going to be cross-sectional, you would click enable here to allow for all the functionality that comes with being able to see participants multiple points over time. Then you'll have the ability to design your data collection instrument. So the instrument is essentially what your data capture tool is. You could have several within a project. You might have several forms, one for demographics, one for their baseline health and what have you. These items are called your instruments. And I'll show you how to design one in a second. I'm just going to walk you through these other items here. So depending on what you've enabled, so if you've enabled longitudinal, some of this and surveys, more of these functionality would be relevant to your project potentially, where you might have instruments that you want these participants to be answering the same questions over time. This is just a shortcut to setting up like who on your study team has access to different functionality in REDCap. This is a reminder that before you do anything with releasing this survey, what have you, for your project, you really should make sure that you test it thoroughly, make sure that your branching logic and all that stuff works. I recommend sending it to like your colleagues, like having them kind of click through, make sure that everything is working appropriately. And then eventually when you're satisfied with how everything is looking and running, then you can actually take your project from development into production. Note that once you go into production, it makes it difficult to make changes. It's not impossible, but it's really much better to get all your kinks out while you're still in the development stage and really test things out thoroughly before you bring it into production. So on the left-hand side, here we see a bunch of our tools. So this right here will bring you to the same as this first tab, Project Home. These are some helpful hot links that once we start entering some instruments, you'll see more of their utility. Once you have participants, the record status dashboard will allow you to see, how complete or incomplete the data collection is for them. You can edit records right here if you're doing data abstraction on your own. If you've got longitudinal study, the calendar functionality is really helpful. This is where you can download the data, whether it be, you can have it be PDFs of the individual responses for each person, or you can have it be in a table. You can have it in a variety of formats. This also will give you some summary statistics like frequencies, means, percentages. Once you have some data in here, it's crude, but it's still helpful just to get a sense for what you have in there. This, if you are offline at any point and you want to still be able to enter new participant information, there is a functionality that allows you to basically enter that information and upload it into REDCap. This is that data comparison tool that's helpful for reviewing the same record and duplicate that I was mentioning earlier, that like double data entry. Logging, so every single thing that you do in REDCap is going to be tracked, and who's doing it will be tracked. So just as an example right here, I haven't done much yet, so all that's listed right now is that I've created this project. But once you do more, like this is going to track everything, like creating instruments. Like if I've entered data in for somebody, it'll say, Sarah entered for person ID 1. And this right here is for if you're the folks that are involved in your project end up commenting on individual questions in REDCap, they can comment there. Any files that get uploaded will be here. This is where we specify user rights. This is where you can set different data quality modules to get at missingness, extreme values, etc. This is for our REDCap mobile app, and then these are extra little goodies that are still in development. And then we have those same help and FAQ and video tutorials that were at the top of the main homepage there. And then if you've got ideas for a new feature, you're more than welcome to suggest one. And this right here, I believe, will go to our Lifespan REDCap support email. Okay, so let's just go ahead and create an instrument. So again, we're going to go into project setup. And to make it easy to start, we're going to use the online designer. Once you get more skilled with this, the data dictionary can be a faster way of creating new variables and instruments, but this is the user-friendly approach. So when you create this instrument, it's automatically named my first instrument. You can change the name of this if you want. Just say, for instance, here we'll call this pets and depression. And we'll save that. Now we can go into it and create some variables. So it's automatically always going to have a can't delete this. This is going to be how it specifies your unique people in your REDCap database. So let's go ahead and add a field. And this is where you can choose from all these different field types. And let's say that we're going to do this project. We want to essentially see if pet ownership is related to reduced prevalence of depression. And we might have some follow-up questions about could it differ by gender or type of pet and all that. So our first question might be something like, yes, no for do you have any pets? We type in that for the label. This is what the person or the abstractor is going to see. When you specify yes, no as a question, it's going to specify what the choices are they can choose from. And as you can see, yes is denoted by 1 and no is denoted by 0 down here. And I'm going to give this a name, a variable name. This is what when your data analyst and whatnot will see. So it's really helpful to have these be somewhat informative names. And then this is where you can specify if it's required or an identifier. In this case, there are the IRB is probably going to have a lot of some guidance for you about whether or not there's certain features that you should not make required, just for patient protection standpoint. This is not an identifier either, so I'm just going to leave these both as no right now. And this just kind of changes where the answer box sits in comparison to the question. I tend to like the left horizontal. The right vertical basically has the question prompt with the answer box immediately to the right of it. The left horizontal will have the question prompt with the answer box right below it. So I'm going to select that one. And now let's say that we want, if someone answers that they have a pet, we want them to be presented with some options to choose from what kind of pets they have. So we can have a checkbox because it's possible that they might have multiple types of pets. So we'll have multiple answer checkboxes. And we'll say, what kinds of pets do you have? And here, so if you don't specify a number value that your different categories will take on, REDCap will do it for you. I do recommend that you come up and don't have use this automated feature. For instance, it's usually pretty standard that for dichotomous things that if it's like a yes no question, that 0 is what you use for no and 1 is what you use for yes. Oftentimes if something could be missing, the number 9 will be used for missing. So there are some standardized things here. So this one, it's not really as relevant here because it's just they're going to be going through and just ticking off boxes for whether they have a cat or dog or what have you. So I will show you what REDCap you don't specify. So here, if I check out, see it's going to tell me I didn't specify, so it's going to set 1, 2, 3, and 4 for those options. And I'm going to call this kind of pets. And we'll again have it be left horizontal. This item to only show up if they answer have a pet. What we do is, so see this, there's all these little functionality right here. Little pencil is edit. This copies the question. This little cursor on the paper moves it. The one that we're interested in right now is this branching logic one here, these 2 arrows. So if you click on that, so when you get more advanced in doing this, you'll be able to put the formula for your branching logic here. But to get started, there's a drag and drop option. So what we do is we want this question to only show up for people that say that, yes, they have a pet. So I can take this response, drag it over here. And you can see up here how that is being coded for the advanced coding. So once again, you'll get a little bit more familiar with this as you start building these data sets. But when we save that, now this question is only going to show up to those folks that answer that they have that kind of pet. I just want to show you a couple more functionality of question types in here. Again, one of the big ones here is we want to ask them about their depression. So let's say that we're using like a questionnaire where you've got multiple questions that all have the same type of responses, whether it be like on a Likert scale or what have you. Here, for this example, I'm going to use the patient health questionnaire 2, which is oftentimes used as a depression screener in clinical practice. What you can do is add a matrix of fields, which is this section right here. Whatever you put in here will appear before all the items. So if you're doing the patient health questionnaire or some other scale where they have guidance about over the past 2 weeks, that's what you put right in this section. So here I'm going to say, over the last 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following? And then each of these rows is going to denote the 2 questions. So I have 2 questions we're going to ask. We're going to ask them, about limited interest or pleasure in doing things and feeling depressed, depressed, or hopeless. And then we're going to call these variables PHQ2A, and this one's going to be called PHQ2B. And then because this is a standardized questionnaire that's already been designed with each of the values have a certain number of value associated with it. We want to make sure that we use what we've seen in the literature there. So it's 0 for not at all. 1 is for several days. 2 for, I think, more than half the days. And then 3 for nearly every day. Okay, so now all we have to do is just give this overall matrix a name, and I'm going to call it PHQ2. And as you can see, it's created this little matrix here, where now for both of these questions, people can choose from these answers. Now, the reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted to show you how we can use calculation fields as well. Because what we do with PHQ2 is we calculate the score, and sometimes the actual score or a cutoff value for that score is of what's interest to us for our research or clinically. So let's go ahead and create a calculation field here. We're going to go ahead and call this one the PHQ2 score. And it's PHQ2 score. And here, the calculation is literally just going to be, we're going to add together what the person responded for the first question and what they responded to for the second question. So here, you're just going to put the variable name for each of these in brackets, and we're adding them together. And then let's say that you also want to include something where you want them to be flagged if they had a certain score value, because that means that they're likely to be depressed, which with a PHQ2, if it's greater than, I think it's 3 and higher, is considered potentially clinically depressed. So we can add another calculation field. We'll call this one depressed. And here, now we're going to specify an if statement where if their patient health questionnaire 2 score is greater than 2, this field is going to take on the value of 1. If not, it's going to be 0. And we're just going to call this depressed. All right, now I'm going to show you all what this looks like when we go into data capture. So let's go over here and add a record. We're just going to add a new record. And this is what you'll see if you've created like a form because you're going to do medical record review. This will be how you would do it. So we've created this data capture form. So again, you can say yes or no. If you answer no, you don't get that question about pets. If you hit yes, now you're going to see this question about what kind of pets that you have. So now with the 2 questions about depression, note that the calculated fields right now are grayed out. I can't enter anything in them. They're going to be calculated for me based on what I enter here. So let's say that I'm going to enter the most extreme value for both of these items. And you can see that it gave me a PHQ-2 score of 6. And here it was 1 for depressed, which means that based on the score, this person flagged as depressed. If instead I had just several days and not at all for these, you can see that there's a score of 1 and they weren't flagged as depressed. Now I just want to quickly show you in here, oops, sorry. We're going to go into an existing one just so you can see one that has a little bit more fake data in it. So this is one that I set up to be longitudinal, but if you have people that have collected data on multiple people, this is what you'll start to see. Right now, this has got 20 patients with worth of fake data in here. The red is there's incomplete data fields in there. The green is that it's complete and I've verified it. The little check mark here is if you enable survey function, you'll be able to see who filled it out as a survey versus like who filled it out like manually by the research team. But yes, that's kind of the gist of this stuff. I figure now we'll kind of turn it over for questions that specific questions folks have. And again, if you're more than welcome to stay on later than the 1 o'clock time period. I'll be on. I can stay on as late as 2 today. So feel free to unmute yourselves at this point. Let me see if anyone said anything in the chat box yet.
Sarah.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Gabriella. I just had a question. So for example, like when you were talking about so just giving like the options for if they had dogs, cats, or what was the other option?
Oh, birds and fish.
And birds, yeah. So for example, like if you have certain options that don't apply to like so like for example, like a certain person, say if they have reptiles, is there an option or a way for you to put other and then they can just type in whatever?
There sure is.
Stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. So let me show you what we can do. Why don't we? So we'll go back into. Let's go back into that project. Sorry. Okay. So let's go back into that little fake project we have. Pets and depression. And we're going to modify our instrument. All right. So let's open up that option again here. And what we'll do right now is we'll add a 5th option called not listed specify. And we'll save that. And now we're going to create another field. It'll be a free text field. And we'll call this specify, other kind of pet. And here you can have pet other or something. And what you want to do, so now that you've created this text variable, is just make it such that they can only see this if they answer not listed. So that's where we're going to go into this little branching arrows again. And again, once you get more comfortable, you can use this advanced coding. Until then, you can go to the drag and drop, and you want them to answer kind of pet, not listed, specify. I don't know why it's giving me this alert right now. I'll just show you what that looks like too once we're in the instrument right here. All right, so now when we click yes, notice that it's not coming up until for the cat, dog, and bird. But once I click not listed, specify, now it pops up and you can give one other little functionality with that. So if you wanted to, I'm gonna save changes before leaving that. If you wanted to make it that they could only answer in a certain kind of way, like you wanted to make sure that they only gave a text response, so you can add some auto validation to that right here. Like so, for instance, here I could just specify that I want letters only and save. What other questions are coming up for folks? Well, while I'm waiting to hear from more folks, I'll show you guys what it looks like when you enable the survey feature. And again, if anyone, I'm just going to keep on powering through, which feel free to just jump in with questions as they happen for you. All right, so I'm going to go back into my file here. So if you wanted to make this a survey that people answer, you click this enable survey option, and now this is going to enable all the survey features in here. We're going to go into our online designer, and we're going to want to specify that we want this instrument to be a survey. And when you do that, it's going to give you a bunch of new options for the survey. This is all the stuff that like your participant would see if they were to open up the survey on their computer. So you could provide a bunch of information about the survey here. You could even up a study logo. You could play around with formatting. These are a bunch of features. You can make it so that if they are make it more accessible, where it can be text to speech, etc. And if folks have more interest in learning about survey features, I'm planning on putting together a longitudinal survey design workshop for the at some point over the next coming months. So that's on the docket. But if we save these changes for right now. With survey, you can distribute it as a public link, or also if you have like a roster of names and emails that you want it to go out to, you can have individual links for those people. So I know, someone I was talking to recently is planning on doing a pre and post survey. So for that person, we're gonna, they're gonna have a roster of people that are gonna be getting the survey at one point in time, and then completing the same survey again in a month. So we want to make sure that they have their own special link. But if you're just doing like a survey that you're releasing en masse on Facebook, for instance, and you don't really, it's just a one point in time survey, you can do this public survey link option. And when you give participants this link, anyone who opens this link will get this. So this is, and again, you can modify all this text, have some really pretty little logos. You can include pictures. I know that Jeff, who's on the call right now, is figuring out how to do some field embedding in here. So maybe you'd have videos or what have you. So there's some real fun functionality with these surveys. I'm going to momentarily stop share here because I can't see. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I see a question from Anne. So about advice on making data, for example, coding male as 1, female as 0, and then making sure to have data dictionary for reference. Oh yes, so I want to show you guys one thing. So I do recommend coming up with a coding scheme in advance. Again, 0 is a good, good for no, 1 is great for yes. Oftentimes, and 9 is used, and versions of 9 is used for missing. Like, so for instance, if you've got a missing income, sometimes it'll be like 99999 will be like the missing value for income. I do recommend using a standardized format for that. In terms of a code book for what will help your data analyst, let me share my screen again. REDCap can actually create one for you in a really helpful way. So I'm going to open up my longitudinal project that I had because it just has more stuff fleshed out. So on that project homepage I showed you at the outset, that has a bunch of stuff. It's got the code book, survey distribution tools, all that stuff. You want to click on code book. And this will give you a data dictionary with all the variables, so what they're named, what they're labeled, and then what type of data can be entered in each of those. This is going to be great for your analyst. This is great for your for the IRB. So this is, yeah, incredibly helpful to specify at the outset. I will say, so in terms of like what variables can be kind of the checkbox variables can be sometimes a headache depending on what you're using them for. And there's certain situations where you definitely need them, like here. You definitely, if you want to know, like, does a person, like, what kind of animals they have. This is essentially what the checkbox is doing. It's creating a new variable for each one of these things. So when you get the data set at the end of the day, you're going to have a separate variable for dog, for cat, for bird, for fish. That's going to be coded as 0 for if that person didn't have that animal, and 1 if they did. So just be mindful of that, that for checkbox variables, when you create those, every single category you put is going to create a brand new variable. Sorry, I can't see my chat box. Oh, there we go. Does it sometimes make sense to edit a project in the data dictionary rather than REDCap? If yes, when would you recommend doing so? So it can be helpful for, especially because it's developing it online is more user-friendly, but it can be slower. Like if you're having to make a lot of changes, and it can be really helpful to add the data dictionary and make them right in Excel. And I'll show you how you do that and what that looks like. And I actually would love, if that's something that people have interest in getting their hands dirty in a bit more, is a data dictionary. We could totally have a future class around the data dictionary. But really briefly, so this is where the data dictionary lives. What you do here is you can download the current version of the data dictionary. And I will I'm gonna stop sharing this screen so you can see what the data dictionary looks like. Okay. All right. So this is what it looks like when you download it. So here, this is what the variable name was that I assigned for each one. If you have multiple instruments, this like I do in this project, I've got 3 different instruments that I've created. This tells you the instrument name. This gives you if you want to specify section headers or have some text before you get into your questions, this is where you can type that. But yes, once you get comfortable in codifying things, like you can actually update, add text variables, add radio variables. This is what you enter for just having like a little descriptive box blurb. This is for checkbox. So it can get, like, again, this is something that I would say don't do until you're getting a little more comfortable in like in what the language looks like in here. But it is a way, like if you, for instance, if you've created this whole instrument and you just want to quickly change the formatting and everything, because you've got some questions that are organized such that the question is on the left-hand side of the response, and you want to kind of clean it up and have them all organized in the same fashion. This right here, just specifying LH all the way across will say, I want my question to the left, and I want the answer for that question to be in a box right below the question, for instance. But this is what that looks like. Another thing, let's see. And of course, so you make changes to these, and you can upload your updated data dictionary right into REDCap, and REDCap will recreate it. I will say, if you're going to do changes to this, so this is something, do as much as you can, as thoroughly as you can when you're still in the development stage. And before you've actually collected data, I will do not make changes to your variables and stuff once you're actively collecting data. Especially possibly, you could end up having accidentally changed the meaning of how someone responded to a question if you make these edits to something that you already have in production. So that is what the data dictionary looks like. So common errors. I will say, so one thing, and I think it's a little bit more so for once you get into the advanced training things, I think that there's a whole host of things that start to arise when you start thinking about doing longitudinal projects and how you're going to set those up in REDCap that will either make your life easy or very difficult, or at least easier. Let me show you. And again, this is something that I would like to do a whole class in and of itself. So don't feel like you have to become an expert in this from what I'm about to show you. Let me just share this. Okay, so see my screen again here. So when you have these longitudinal data sets, the way that will kind of give you the least grief is that you end up, like, especially if you've got something where you're where you have the same questions that you're going to be asking people at multiple points in time. Which what I've done here is I have this measure right here, this pets and depression instrument that I've created that I'm going to ask them at baseline, I'm going to ask them at 3 months, I'm going to ask them at 6 months, but I want it to be the same question asked at those points in time. You create just a single instrument, and then you can even just tell REDCap that you want to use that instrument at multiple points in time. So here, I've told REDCap I have certain items that are only happening at baseline, but they're going to be using this survey at multiple points in time. And this is going to, like, data structure wise, instead of having multiple columns in this case for like every single visit, you have now all these columns going across this way. Now you're going to have multiple rows for a participant where they're going to have, for each visit, they've got a row. But I think I just made things more complicated than they need to be for this introduction workshop. But I promise that if you come to the future survey, longitudinal survey workshop, that we'll get into it in a much more clear way. Yes, so there is a way for us to add, so I've got a question here about surveys. I'm not surveys, signature line. And yes, there is a way to add a signature line. So, and actually, so e-consent is something that we can do now. And let me just share my screen again. So you can either create or add this to your instrument on your own, an option for signature line, or if the reason why you want that signature is because you're doing e-consent, there's actually a form that you can start your whole project off with using this already created e-consent form. But let me just give you show you where that signature line lives in the project setup. Sorry. So we're just going to go back into our element here. And why don't we just go into our roster? It's not just to have a place to plop it. So you go to add field, and then you can see right here, signature. And this is this will prompt them to draw their signature with a mouse or a finger. oh, sorry, we need to specify participant signature, and I'm going to have this be an identifier. I'm just going to show you what this looks like in if we want to go in, oh, hang on, we'll go into a person's record so that we can see what that. All right, so here they could add signature. It could be, if you've got a touch screen, you could do it on the touch screen or with your mouse. And now we've got a signature to file. I do want to show you that if you are doing electronic consent, so I'm just going to exit this this project and pretend to create a new one for a second here. So new project, and I'm going to show you from the templates below. So there's this e-consent template, and this is a template that actually has, I believe it's based from our IRB and everything, where it even gives you, well, I can even open up and show you, but they have like the IRB form that you submit where they like to tell you the areas that you have to update for your project and whatnot, all highlighted in here as well, where you can have a consent form, which we can even, let's just make this really quick here. So we'll call this consent. And we'll say, this is also just for fun. I just want to show you what this looks like in here. So what this does, so we've uploaded this thing where we don't have to create these instruments, they've already been created for us. There might be things you don't need and you could delete. Like, so if you're not including kids in your samples, you could delete that. But if you open up this instrument, for example, this is what the IRB has done. So you can, it'll want you to update in here. And yeah, so that's e-consent in here.